Hi everybody. Today we are going to have a look at the assets in the accounting. Here's the agenda. We are going to have a look first at some concepts regarding the assets. Then we are going to install the asset module. As a third topic, we are going to see how we can configure the assets types. Those are kind of categories for the assets. And then we'll see, maybe that's the most important part, we will see how we can create and manage the assets, knowing that we will discover two ways of creating the assets. The first way would be to create a PO first and automatically create the asset, and then the second way is to create the asset manually. There is although a third way, which is importing the assets. We will cover that in the next video. Let's have a look at our concepts first and see the definitions of two different things here, the assets and the asset types. For the first definition, we consider an asset as being an acquisition made by your company. Historically, a physical acquisition, but you can see here it's not always true, and that acquisition, that purchase, will last long enough to decide that even if you purchase it today, we are going to use this asset for the next couple of years, and we want to reflect this use and the depreciation caused by this use in our accounting. The asset types can be considered as two different things, in fact. In the real world, let's say in the accounting world, it's a kind of a category name we give to the asset, like that's a computer, that's a car, knowing that we usually attach a depreciation template to this name, like computers will be depreciated over the course of 3 years and cars around 5 years. In Odoo, it's a bit the same, where we consider it's a category name and it explains how we plan to compute the depreciation board of the assets so that different assets from the same category, let's say two computers, will be managed the same way regarding their depreciation. Now we discovered the concept, let's install the assets module. Once you are in your favorite business software, click on the accounting application, then under configuration settings, you will see that here you have a checkbox for installing the assets management module. Click on apply and the module will be installed. Once the module is installed, you can access the assets configuration by going into the accounting app again, and then under configuration you will find the different assets type here, and you will find all the assets right under advisor. Let's now have a look at the assets type configuration, where we will be able to define the different depreciation rules. As you know it, we'll go into the accounting. Under configuration we will find the different assets types. Let's create my first asset type. I will create here an asset for my computers, and I will record the depreciations over the course of 3 years. And besides the name, you can see that there are also other information that you need to provide. Here we have first the journal. I will use my miscellaneous journal. And you have then the asset account, the depreciation account, and the expense account. Let's have a look at all those different accounts right now and try to explain the differences between those accounts. First, we have the asset account that will hold the value of the asset when we purchase it. So that's maybe the most simple one, because after we have two other accounts. The first of which is the depreciation asset account, where we will accumulate the depreciations on our balance sheet. And then we have the second account, which is a depreciation expense account, where we will record every depreciation on the income statement. In my example, I'm going to use the following accounts. Here I created an account for my computers and for the amortization, and then the depreciation. With these settings, I can also choose the periodicity, where I can say if I want to take a specific number of depreciations or if I want to make my depreciations based on an ending date. Of course, if I change this, the fields here will change. For my first example here, I will use a number of depreciations, and I want to be really precise, so I'm going to say, as I have 3 years, I will select 36 months of 1 entry every month. So with these settings, I would have 36 different entries over the course of 3 years, one every month. Then I'm asked to select if I want to keep linear or digressive. I will keep the linear method here. It's the most simple, where you will have for the 36 entries every time the same amount being depreciated. Otherwise, you have the other option, which is digressive, and in that case you will have a digressive factor, which is the factor that will multiply the residual value for every time you want to depreciate. Here it would be a bit too high anyway for 36 entries. Let's now save this asset type and reuse it for my first asset creation. Let's see then how we can create those assets. And you can see that we have a mini agenda for this part, where we are going to see how you can create manually an asset, or you can create an asset from a PO. Then we'll see how you can automatically post the asset entries. We'll see that we have a cron job for that in Odoo, and then we'll have a look at the assets reporting. So let's create our first asset. I told you the first one would be created manually. We go into advisor asset, and as the list is empty, let's create a new asset. I will select here HP Pro Book 430, which is my computer at the moment. I'm selecting the category, which is the asset type we just created in the previous topic. And as soon as I've selected this category, you'll see that the depreciation information here has been changed in order to reflect all the information I have in my category. So if I have a look at here, the depreciations, the computation method, and so on, we can see that of course it's the same information as the one I have here for the periodicity and the depreciation method. So that's what will be changed by my category here. Let's go back to the depreciation board, and now we have to enter the gross value of my asset. The gross value is usually the cost, the purchase price. So let's say here it was 650 bucks. And then we have the salvage value, which is a part of the value we cannot depreciate, because at the end of the 3 years, we can still consider that my computer has some value. Let's imagine that after 3 years, we say that it still has $200 of value. It means that the residual value is computed automatically by Odoo and gives a bit more than $400. Eventually here I can maybe link this to one of my vendors or an invoice if I already have the invoice in Odoo, but at the moment here as I'm creating this manually I won't have an invoice linked, and I can save my asset, and you can see that here automatically the depreciation board is computed. The depreciation board here will show all the different depreciations that will occur in the lifetime of the product, knowing that here of course I have 36 different depreciations. But keeping my asset here as unconfirmed won't do anything. I won't have any asset entry being generated in my accounting. As you can see here, it's still in draft. I need to confirm this asset once I've verified that everything in here is correct. So the value, the depreciation board, and so on. So here I will confirm it. And you will see right away that you have some red dots here that appeared, and those are for showing if the entries have already been posted. So you could be posting yourself the entries manually. But we'll see later in our third topic here that Odoo provides two ways for posting this automatically or at least semi-automatically. So I will keep this asset here. I will now create another asset, but not from scratch, not manually. I will create it from a purchase invoice. You could be creating it also from a purchase order and then validate the purchase order and then receive the invoice, but here I will skip that step and automatically receive it from the invoice, from the vendor bill here. Let's select my supplier. Let's say I received it from Amazon, and you can see here that when I add a product, let's select HP, should I have a ProBook here? I know I still need to create that product, but I'm not even obliged to use a product. I could be using directly the description and say, okay, it's a HP ProBook. And I have a category here, an asset category that I can use, and directly you can see that the account switched. I'm not using my old account anymore. I'm using the account that I gave here in the definition of my asset. As you can see here, the asset account. So I can keep it that way. I will maybe enter, of course, a price. I will have a different one this time. I save this vendor bill, and once I validate this, as you know, the journal entry will be created here, but I also have now an asset that is created. You will find it under Advisor Assets, and you can see here that now I have my second HP ProBook that has been generated, always in draft. If I go there, then I have also all my depreciations in my depreciation board. Of course, here you can imagine that the big advantage compared to the first time I created the asset is that the name will be created automatically. The category is selected because I gave it on the invoice line. You have the reference, which is the same as the invoice name. You have the vendor, so everything is automatically filled in. Every field is completed automatically, and you have then just the salvage value to enter. And I can say here, same as for the other computer, that I have this value, and then I can maybe recompute the depreciation if it's not done automatically, but it was. So that's it. Now I have also to confirm this asset, and now I have two different running assets. And what I can do now is at least, as I have, I think, two different entries, yes, for the month of June, which is the month at which I'm currently recording this video. We have one entry here and one other for the other asset. So for those two assets, I could be generating at least the first depreciations lines, the first depreciation entries. But in order to do so, usually you should go into Advisor here. You have a specific menu item for that, but it's only available in debug mode. So I will switch and take my second tab here, where you have it here under Generate Assets Entries. And here you are going to say, okay, for which month I would like to, well, for which month, which period I would like to select and create these asset entries. If I click here on Generate Entries, automatically Odoo will generate those entries, and you can see that I have two entries generated because I have two different assets. You can see also that the amounts are slightly different. That's because I have my first asset, which is valued, I think it was 650, while the other one was 700. So that's why you have such a difference. And so I had to create these entries by going into the generate asset entries, but there is another way to generate those. You could have done that manually from the asset, but then if you have, let's say, 100 assets in your company, it could really be a nightmare. But this can be done completely automatically. Let's say here it was semi-automated because I still have to go into Advisor, generate asset entries, but Odoo offers another way to generate that, which is through the use of a cron. So we have a cron for that. It is here. It can be found under technical, and then right here under scheduled actions, you should have something like here, yeah, generate asset entries, and you can see that it is computed every month. So every month we will compute this, and usually it will generate the assets, well, the depreciations for all the assets that are currently running. Finally, you also know that we have some reporting on the assets. It can be found right here when you go in your accounting app. Then under the reports, you have under management, you have the assets. And here you can see, well, different measures like what's the gross amount, the unposted amount, the counts of the assets. And you can, of course, use different group by features. Like here we have by asset, by categories, by purchase months, depreciation. Well, so here, of course, I don't have a lot of data. I just have two assets for which I depreciate for just 1 month. But you know that you have lots of possibilities with that kind of pivot tables and graph views. So that's it for today. I think we covered quite a lot regarding the assets. We saw first how we could create the asset categories, which we call also the asset types. Then we had a look at how we could create manually or from a vendor bill all the assets, and we saw as well how we could generate the asset entries. So that's a good point. But there is maybe another part that is missing at the moment, which is how you can import assets. Let's imagine that you were using another software before Odoo and you want to re-import your assets, or you have still assets being, let's say, in their lifetime. We have depreciated half of it and we still have to depreciate a bit more, and you plan to do that in Odoo. So how you could do that? Well, that's the topic of the next video. In the meantime, really thanks for watching and see you in that next video.